So talk about the first question here. It says what?
It is the first question.
What is the first question you ask a client? Okay. What's interesting to me about that question is that you start with the notion that you should be asking questions.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit more about that and your process. When you go into a client, what's the first thing you do?
I seriously believe myself, and I tell everybody on the team as well, that we certainly do need to focus on asking good and right questions. Because a lot of times asking the right questions gets the client thinking, you know, thinking about scenarios that they may not have thought of before, thinking about things that may lead to identifying scope gaps and may result in, you know, more business for us, but also they're covered at the same time, and they understand that we understand the system and we understand where the gaps might be.
Yeah.
And you know, that those are, I mean, that's very, very basic process, asking the right question. It could be something as simple as, where do I find certain information? Or, you know, why is this not included in the specifications that we're, you know, starting the design with?
Right.
Have you thought about something in certain direction, and so on, so on. But without those questions, it's hard to get started.
It's interesting, and I think there's a real temptation to want to come in and demonstrate to a customer, especially a new customer, that we have expertise, and we do. And therefore, the temptation, I think, is to start talking. And you're saying no, start by asking.
Yes, and that usually works in our favor, in customers' favor too, when we think about the project or in general towards the success of the project. And that's because there are usually cases where things are forgotten or missed just for various reasons. You know, it could be because nobody thought of it before. Maybe the right people were not involved at customers' end until now, and now they are involved. Maybe we are getting involved very late, and now we're bringing up these questions. A lot of reasons, right? But or, you know, the people that were involved before didn't have the right expertise, so on, so on. But the idea is that we do bring up these questions and get a good start. A lot of times with these questions, the customer would ask counter questions, and then that's when the experience comes into picture, and we would tell them how we have handled those situations in past, and that helps gain them our trust, you know, gain their trust. That way we can really get on the right foot and start on the right foot and get going with the design and the rest of the project in a better way.
This makes sense. This makes perfect sense. What's funny about it to me, and this is just a personal opinion, is that it's easier to do it that way.
Yes.
It's better for everybody. I mean, it just makes the whole project go more smoothly.
Certainly.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the pitfalls here. I like that one because the initial design phase, I think the initial design phase, from my way of seeing it, is often overlooked, or let me say it differently. Chances are that as a systems integrator, we're called in maybe when clients think that the design phase is done, and they just are handing off to us something complete. Yes. And I suspect you can talk about this. That's not always the case.
That is correct. We start with what we call our basis of design documents, and that's designed for somebody else, that, you know, process design and so on, that they start with, or sometimes a conceptual design that we start with as our basis of design, and we take it further in much more detail. However, a lot of these details are lost a lot of times, and that's mainly because either the right people are not involved at the time, or they don't have the right expertise. They don't necessarily have the hands-on experience with these systems, how to integrate these systems together, how to deal with systems that come from different vendors and different backgrounds with different thought process in mind when they design their own pieces of equipment, but then we know how to put it all together. Yeah. And a lot of times those details are missed. A lot of times people don't think about having standardization across all their different systems, and that's a big missing piece most often. And what that does is causes a bit of chaos or causes a bit of concern, you know, when it comes to putting all these equipment together on a single network or as seeing a larger system that makes it all work together appropriately.
Yeah.
But that's where our expertise comes into picture. We are really good at dealing with all these things, and makes it easy for us to know all the details. And again, asking good question goes to a great length to make sure we have all the right details to be able to design things appropriately.
Nice.
But
makes sense. It is in the details, isn't it? I mean, it really comes.
yes.
And this is all about complexity, right? We like to say that we don't know exactly what will happen in the course of any given project, but we know that there'll be complexity. We know there's going to be changes. We know there are going to be unforeseen issues that arise, and this planning phase and getting into the details can help avoid some of the worst of it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of complexity and changes, even when there has been cases, I'll give you an example. Even when there has been cases where the customer says, "Hey, you did this project for me. I'm building another facility, same kind of plant, same product I'll be manufacturing on West Coast. Would you help me?" Sure. Is it going to cost me the same? Not necessarily. Maybe less, maybe more. It depends on a lot of things. But the point there being that they would expect that I'm copying the same thing over, but it's not as simple. It's not literally like copying Lego blocks and building the same thing again. There are always differences. There are different people involved. There are different reasons due to local laws, due to local geography, a lot of other reasons, availability of people, knowledge of people, what their preferences are, and so on. Things do end up being different, even in those cases.
Yeah.
And to handle complexity, for professionals like us, it's not a big deal. It is possible that a lot of people might think some things are complex versus others, but that definition of complex may be different for us, and may be different for somebody who's not used to doing system integration. The key part is understanding what the client requires, what the requirements are, and understanding how their process or system needs to work. And once you understand those things, everything else usually falls in place. What we do is we take a layered approach when it comes to defining the functional design, when it comes to creating software and so on, and that usually also gives us flexibility. So when things change, and they almost always do, it makes it much easier for us to adapt and be nimble and continue with whatever we're going to build or change course and then build differently going forward.
This is good. This is exactly, I think, where, as you say, where system integrators must live is embracing the complexity, being comfortable and enjoying almost the fact that there's going to be some difficulties along the way, but if you plan for it and if you prepare for it,
absolutely,
you can take advantage of it almost. And I think what I heard you say a moment ago, and I want to see if I understood you right, is you start by making sure you understand the requirements, the business requirements of a client, right? Not
absolutely.
Just what they perhaps came to us to ask for, but instead, well, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to go with this?
Yeah, and a lot of times the clients or customers don't necessarily think of the long-term goals or bring them up. A lot of times they oftentimes only bring up their short-term requirements in the picture, but you have to ask the right question to understand what their long-term goals are so you can provide the solutions accordingly. Because if you get short-sighted and provide something that works now, but 2 months later, as soon as they try to do something more, expand on that idea or take it further, it will fall short, and we have to avoid that situation.
Yeah.
We definitely have to work together so that those requirements are captured and not forgotten.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I think sometimes it gets overlooked.
Yes.
What have you seen as you move further into a project and are implementing the things that have been planned and approved and now you're implementing? What do you see as some of the common pitfalls and things that happen during the course of any sort of large, complex project?
Most of the pitfalls that I've seen are either due to lack or poor communication, I would say. Even though there are competent people on the project, it's a good team and so on, but if there's not enough communication, it usually results in trouble. And certainly needs to avoid that. So, encouraging the right communication is definitely the key. And of course, the knowledge and the ability to adapt and be able to handle the changing nature of people's input that make our design change and other reasons that make things different on the fly all of a sudden. And being nimble and adaptive is the key here.
What happens when a change comes down, when a situation arises where you see a change is necessary? What's the process look like for that? How does that work?
When something like that comes up, usually you don't only think of that one thing that's changing. You have to think of the trickle effect. What else is going to change when I change this one little thing? Right. That's often forgotten, and a lot of times changes that come in or are thought by other users or people as trivial end up becoming a big deal, and they end up becoming a much larger amount of scope of work than people would think. So there's usually that negotiation that happens, I'm going to call it, or negotiation in terms of technical change, technical nature, or it could be commercial and so on. But the point is that you have to think it through, and without that, it could be a big trouble. That we have seen where a vendor would come on site for their routine maintenance. They would make a slight tweak, thinking, "Oh, I want to bring it up to my latest version of software and so on." But then it breaks everything else. Right. Even though their system may work slightly better with new features, it breaks the entire bigger system as a larger picture. They destroy things.
That's scary. Yeah.
It is.
So let's jump ahead a little bit and think about as we near completion of a project.
Mm-hmm.
And we do, of course, work in a project format, typically. Not always, but typically. It's very tempting, I suspect, to say, terrific, we're done, and now we can move on to the next thing. But as a seasoned veteran of so many projects, I imagine you probably have some ideas around what's next. The projects end, yes, but what should customers be thinking about in order to make sure that the project is successful, even after it's finished, or ostensibly finished?
So two things that come into mind when you ask that question. First one is, of course, supporting the customer on an ongoing basis. A lot of times, these plants or sites may or may not have the right staffing with the correct knowledge to be able to support the systems. Ideally, the way we build the system shouldn't need a lot of support, and it should mostly be automated, of course, and not need a lot of human intervention. But there are still reasons why the support may be needed, because it's new, they may need changes and so on, and we offer that support. We don't leave the customer stranded. There's usually a support contract that we offer along with certain preventive maintenance that's included, and that again may cover other things or needs that they may not have thought of on an ongoing basis. And a lot of times, the second part that I was talking about, a lot of times when a project starts, either certain requirements are missed, or there may be budget constraint, there may be schedule constraint, reasons why parts of the project or certain features and parts of the system may not have been implemented. There's usually an ongoing, that's usually part of ongoing improvement process where the customer would ask for help, or we would offer that these are the things you can do next, and it takes the system to a next level, expands it, or provides other benefit where it makes their process more efficient.